to new developments tonight in the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. Authorities are now focusing tonight on two central pieces of evidence, including what could be that crucial DNA found in Nancy Guthrie's home.
The third time the FBI opened the septic tank beneath Nancy Guthrie's house. They didn't send the same team. They sent a specialized forensic unit, the kind you call when you already know what's down there, and you need to prove it holds up in court. What they pulled from underneath that property in Arizona has not been officially disclosed, but sources close to the investigation are using one word to describe it: brutal. And the 84-year-old grandmother who lived above that ground has not been seen alive since a masked figure walked up to her front door.
New surveillance images showing a person wearing a mask, gloves, and a backpack tampering with the camera at Guthrie's Arizona home the morning she disappeared.
At 1:47 in the morning, looked directly into the camera and covered the lens with a gloved hand. The woman who vanished? Nancy Guthrie was 84 years old. She required daily medication to stay alive, not a supplement, not something optional. Medication that, according to people familiar with her medical condition, could become a matter of life and death within days if missed. She was the mother of Savannah Guthrie, co-host of NBC's Today Show.
It wasn't long after Savannah joined the Today Show family that we all fell in love with the matriarch of her own family, Nancy Guthrie.
One of the most recognized faces in American morning television. Nancy was private. She was proud. She had spent her later years in Arizona watching her daughter's career from a comfortable distance, living the kind of quiet life that nobody builds a security perimeter around. And that's exactly what made her vulnerable. In the early hours of a freezing morning in 2026, Nancy didn't answer her phone. She missed that critical medication. The people closest to her, the ones who knew her routines down to the minute, who knew she never missed a dose, who knew what missing a dose meant for a woman her age with her conditions, those people raised the alarm immediately. And when law enforcement arrived at her home, expecting a wellness check, what they walked into was something else entirely. Dried blood on the front porch.
Videos from the scene show a trail of blood on the porch that was confirmed to be Nancy Guthrie's.
Not a trace. Not a smudge you could explain away. Enough blood to collect, test, and confirm through forensic analysis as belonging to Nancy Guthrie. Enough blood to change the entire classification of this case before investigators had been on scene for an hour. Here's the thing. That blood tells its own story before anyone says a word. Blood on a porch at that hour, belonging to a woman who is nowhere to be found, who hasn't taken her medication, who hasn't contacted a single person in her life. That does not suggest she wandered off. It does not suggest she left voluntarily. It suggests violence. It suggests a struggle. And what the Nest security camera mounted on the front of her house captured that night didn't just confirm it, it made the whole thing 10 times worse. At 1:47 a.m., a figure appeared at Nancy's front door.
The FBI says at this point, the person that you just saw, though, is not considered a suspect.
But that is a chilling image, and it's the first significant lead in this case that we have seen since Guthrie vanished.
Ski mask, gloves, zip-up fleece, backpack, and strapped to their body, visible in the footage according to every security analyst who has reviewed it, a holstered firearm. This person did not stumble onto the wrong address. They did not improvise. They moved with the kind of deliberate precision that made Dr. Raymond Torres, a former FBI behavioral analyst and criminal profiling specialist at Quantico, visibly uncomfortable when he reviewed the footage on camera. Torres studied the frames for several seconds before he spoke. Then he said, "This individual conducted pre-operational surveillance. They know the property, they know the camera placement, they know the victim's patterns. This is not impulsive. This is mission-driven behavior." He paused, shook his head, and added, "That level of preparation in a case involving an elderly target is deeply concerning because it tells you this person had a specific objective and a plan for after. A specific objective and a plan for after." Let that sit for a moment, because what happened after is the part the cameras didn't fully capture, and the part the FBI has been digging for, literally ever since.
Investigators are still going through tens of thousands of tips and potential evidence after conducting multiple late-night searches over the weekend with no arrests.
The footage and the glove. Now, this is where it gets dark. The Nest camera footage has become one of the most dissected pieces of evidence in a missing persons case in years. Frame by frame, analysts have pulled it apart, and what they found buried in the pixels might be the single detail that cracks this entire investigation. The masked figure reached up to cover the camera lens. Deliberate, controlled. But in one frame, magnified and enhanced, analysts identified what appears to be a small hole or tear in one of the gloves, right at the fingertip. One tiny imperfection in an otherwise flawless operational execution. And that imperfection changes everything. Dr. Lisa Nakamura, a forensic trace evidence specialist at the University of California's Forensic Science program, reacted physically when she saw the enhanced image. She leaned forward, pointed at the screen, and said, "If that fingertip made contact with any surface near that door, the handle, the frame, the camera housing, you're potentially looking at a partial print or epithelial DNA transfer. One touch. That's all it takes." She went quiet for a beat, then added, "Whoever planned this spent considerable effort on concealment. But biology doesn't care about your plan. One exposed fingertip can undo months of preparation. One exposed fingertip against months of planning. That's the razor edge this case is sitting on right now. But here's something else analysts flagged that hasn't gotten nearly enough attention. There's confusion about the sequence of the Nest camera images themselves. One frame appears to show the suspect with the backpack and the visible firearm. Another frame shows different positioning, possibly different items, possibly a different moment in the approach.
Now, we also know investigators have recovered a number of gloves in the area and foothills nearby. Not clear the significance, and the sheriff also downplaying criticism that the FBI and local authorities might be at odds on this case, saying everybody is working together.
Investigators have not publicly clarified which image represents which phase of the encounter. That ambiguity has fueled massive speculation in both online communities and law enforcement circles, because the difference between those frames could tell you whether this was one person acting alone or something more. Coordinated. And get this, there were other cameras on that property, beyond the Nest device. Cameras covering additional angles, other approaches, views that could have shown a vehicle, a second person, the direction this figure came from, and where they went after. Those cameras were not recording. The subscription had lapsed. The service was inactive. Every angle that might have answered the questions, investigators are now spending millions of dollars trying to solve. Gone. Because a monthly payment wasn't renewed. If this case already has your attention, hit subscribe, because this investigation is far from over, and what comes next is going to change everything. The detective who said the word no one else would. In the days following Nancy's disappearance, while official statements still used phrases like active search and maintaining hope, one man said what everyone in law enforcement was already thinking, but nobody in an official position had the nerve to say out loud. Lieutenant Frank Del Vecchio, retired, LAPD, Special Investigations Unit, 31 years on the force, spoke to reporters and dismantled the official narrative in under 2 minutes. He said, "This kidnapping, if that is what it is, violates every rule in the book." And he wasn't being dramatic. He laid it out piece by piece. Standard ransom kidnappings, Del Vecchio explained, almost always involve someone known to the victim. They're impulsive, personal, driven by desperation or a relationship that went sideways. They are messy, emotional, and usually collapse within days because the person who did it can't maintain the deception. The figure on that Nest footage is none of those things. That figure is organized, professional, controlled, someone who came with equipment, mapped the surveillance layout in advance, and executed a plan with the kind of cold discipline that Del Vecchio said he's only seen in a handful of cases across 3 decades. That profile, Del Vecchio said, his voice dropping, points somewhere very different from a typical ransom case. And then he said it, the word that changed the entire temperature of the investigation.
As we know from the public standpoint, I think that the law enforcement there are asking for the public's help.
He said that given the length of time Nancy had been missing, combined with her age, her complete medical dependency, and the volume of blood found at the scene, he would not be treating this as a kidnapping. He would be treating it as a homicide. He went quiet after he said it, not for effect. Because the weight of that word, applied to an 84-year-old grandmother whose daughter the whole country watches every morning, is the kind of thing that even a 31-year veteran has to sit with for a second. But here's the catch. That was just the beginning of what investigators would find. Because the ransom notes were about to make everything worse. the ransom chaos. Most kidnapping cases produce one demand, one note, one communication channel, one set of rules. What happened in the Nancy Guthrie case was nothing like that. The ransom demands came in pieces, fragmented, disorganized. And whether that chaos was a calculated strategy to overwhelm investigators or the signature of something more desperate and unstable is a question no one has been able to answer. Here's why that matters more than you think. Police arrested a man in Southern California connected to one of the ransom notes, and it was entirely fraudulent. This person had zero connection to Nancy's disappearance, zero knowledge of what actually happened. He saw a high-profile missing persons case, and he decided to insert himself. He sent a note. He claimed involvement. He attempted by multiple accounts to profit off the abduction of an 84-year-old woman who was going to die without her medication. And that single act of opportunistic cruelty didn't just disgust investigators, it poisoned the entire evidence stream. Because now, every subsequent note, every demand, every claim of contact has to be weighed against. The possibility that it came from another fraud, not from whoever took Nancy, from someone trying to ride the wave of another family's terror. And this happens more often than the public realizes. High-profile missing persons cases attract these parasites like clockwork. But in this case, the timing was devastating. That kind of interference can delay a genuine investigative response by days, sometimes longer, as analysts have to authenticate every communication from scratch.
The GPS doesn't always get it right. Interesting analysis there, Morgan. Let's talk about the gun and the holster. That's something else that you really honed in on.
And in a case where an elderly woman without her heart medication has been missing for weeks, days aren't an abstract concept. Days are measured in organ function. Days are measured in survival probability. Days are the narrowing window between outcomes a family never recovers from. But here's what nobody is talking about. The ransom demanded $6 million. That number didn't come from nowhere. Someone knew enough about this family's financial position to set a figure that was ambitious, but theoretically payable. That suggests research. That suggests knowledge. And that circles right back to Dr. Torres' assessment of mission-driven behavior from someone who studied this target before they ever set foot on that porch. Now, here's where this case goes underground, literally. What the FBI found underneath federal investigators returned to Nancy Guthrie's Arizona home, not once, not twice. They came back again and again, and each time the equipment changed. The first visits looked like standard property sweeps. The later visits did not. They brought long metal probes. They brought high-intensity forensic lighting. They opened the septic tank on the property and searched it, methodically, thoroughly, and with the kind of grim focus that tells you exactly what they expected to find. They examined the grounds surrounding the foundation. They towed Nancy's vehicle for full forensic processing. And according to multiple sources who have spoken to journalists covering the investigation, federal agents took a specific, sustained, and deeply unusual interest in what exists beneath the physical structure of the home itself. Let me be direct about what that means. When the FBI brings ground-penetrating equipment to a missing persons case and starts examining what's underneath a house, they are not looking for someone who is going to walk through the front door. That is not what that equipment is for. That is not what that search posture indicates. People who search underground in a missing persons case have crossed a line in their thinking that they do not cross back over. They have moved from rescue to recovery, from hope to evidence preservation. Sources familiar with the investigation have indicated that agents examined the possibility of underground spaces beneath the property, whether modified storage areas, constructed chambers, or structural features that do not appear in any official building record. Whether those spaces were found, what they contained, and what condition that content was in has not been confirmed publicly.
Late last night and into this morning, a parade of police vehicles setting up roadblocks, searching a home, detaining a man, and seizing a Range Rover.
But the scale of the operation, the number of return visits, the escalation in forensic capability each time, the fact that they brought in a specialized unit on the third visit, all of it points in one direction. And it is not the direction anyone in Nancy's family wants to face. Here's the thing that keeps investigators up at night about this detail. If there are spaces beneath that property that were used in connection with Nancy's disappearance, it means whoever did this didn't just know the house. They knew what was under it. They had access that goes beyond casing a property from the street. That's intimate knowledge. That's someone who had been inside, possibly someone who had been underneath. And that possibility, that this was not a stranger abduction, but something involving someone with deep familiarity with the property, is a line of inquiry that multiple analysts covering this case have raised publicly. Law enforcement has neither confirmed nor denied it. They've simply kept digging. The midnight raid. In the middle of the night, investigators executed a tactical raid on a separate residence. A man was pulled from the property, handcuffed, and held for hours. Then, without a single charge filed, he was released. That man was connected to this investigation in a way that federal agents considered significant enough to justify a full nighttime tactical operation. The kind of raid you don't authorize on a hunch. He was apparently not connected in a way that justified keeping him in custody. What he knew, what he told them, what his relationship to Nancy or to the property or to the masked figure in that footage might be, none of it has been made public. And in cases like this, when investigators raid someone's home and then go completely silent about what they found, it almost always means the same thing. Whatever they recovered is being folded into something larger, an indictment, a case they're building brick by brick behind closed doors, something they are not ready to show yet. But when they do, it's going to land like a bomb. Here's why that matters right now. That man was released. He's out there.
We'll see someone get arrested, and we know that then they're in custody.
He knows what he told the FBI, and the FBI knows what he told them. And the fact that he wasn't charged doesn't mean he's innocent. It means whatever he gave them was more valuable to the investigation, with him on the outside than on the inside. That's a tactical decision. That's prosecutors making a calculation about how to use what they have. And it means the next move in this case could come from a direction nobody is watching. Meanwhile, Nancy's vehicle underwent what sources describe as an exhaustive forensic examination. Every fiber, every hair, every print, every trace of biological material. Vehicles in cases like this are treated as sealed crime scenes on wheels. Whatever that car revealed is now locked, inside a case file that grows heavier by the day. But the question hanging over all of it is the one nobody has answered yet. A daughter's nightmare on live television. Savannah Guthrie found out her mother was missing the way no human being should receive that kind of news. And what she did next took a kind of courage that doesn't feel like courage when you're inside it. She stepped in front of cameras, not as an anchor, not as a journalist covering someone else's worst day. As a daughter whose world had just been ripped apart. She spoke directly to whoever took her mother, her voice cracking in real time, her composure built over decades of live television, failing in front of millions of people. She withdrew from her coverage of the Winter Olympics, an assignment she had prepared for months to deliver. She and her siblings recorded raw, emotional video appeals, begging for Nancy's safe return, looking into camera lenses that Savannah had looked into thousands of times before. Except this time, the teleprompter was blank, and the script was just desperation. There is a moment in one of those recordings where Savannah's voice breaks completely. Not dramatically, not theatrically, just the sound of a woman whose mother has been ripped away from her. And who knows, somewhere beneath the hope she's still clinging to, that the ground under this case has already shifted towards something she cannot bring herself to say out loud.
Mommy, if you are hearing this, you are a strong woman. You are God's precious daughter, Nancy.
She had spent her entire career telling other people's stories, delivering other families' tragedies through a lens of professional distance. And now she was standing in the wreckage of her own, looking into that same lens and pleading with a stranger in a ski mask to give her mother back. Those videos turned a private horror into a national conversation overnight. Because when the daughter of a missing woman is also the person millions of Americans trust every morning to tell them the truth, an 84-year-old grandmother in Arizona stops being a case number. She becomes someone's mother, and that changed every calculation in this investigation. But all that visibility hasn't produced the one thing that actually matters. Nancy Guthrie, alive, walking through a door. The tear in the glove. So here is where this case stands tonight. And here is the brutal truth of it. A Nest camera captured a masked, armed figure at an 84-year-old woman's door at 1:47 a.m. That figure reached up and covered the lens. Blood was found on the porch, confirmed as Nancy's. Additional cameras that could have captured more were dead. A retired homicide veteran publicly called this a murder investigation. Ransom notes arrived in fragments, at least one confirmed fraudulent. Investigators probed the septic tank, searched the grounds, towed the vehicle, raided a separate residence in the middle of the night, and reportedly excavated beneath the house itself. And through all of it, one detail keeps surfacing: the tear in the glove. A small hole at the fingertip, visible in the footage, confirmed by analysts. One microscopic failure in an otherwise meticulously executed operation. Dr. Nakamura called it biology overruling planning. Lieutenant Del Vecchio would call it the thread that unravels the whole thing. Dr. Torres would call it a signature, because even the most disciplined operators leave one. That tear is either the break that brings this case to a close, or it's a detail that ultimately leads nowhere.
As investigators focus on DNA found on a glove discovered about 2 miles from her home.
That is the brutal, honest reality of where things stand tonight. But here is what the investigation has not yet revealed, and what sources say is coming: the full forensic results from underneath the property, the DNA analysis from the blood on the porch, the complete processing of Nancy's vehicle, the identity or identities connected to the ransom communications that were not fraudulent, and whatever that man who was raided and released in the middle of the night told federal agents during those hours. He sat in handcuffs. That information exists. It is sitting in a case file right now, and when those pieces surface, and they will, this case is going to look very different from the outside than it does at this moment. Every case has a turning point, a moment where the evidence stops accumulating and starts converging, where the fragments stop being confusing and start forming a picture that cannot be unseen. Sources close to this investigation believe that moment is coming. Some believe it has already happened behind closed doors, and the public simply hasn't been told yet. Nancy Guthrie was 84 years old. She watched her daughter on television every morning. She was proud. She was private. She was not supposed to become this story. And somewhere in the gap between what that camera recorded at 1:47 a.m. and what the FBI pulled from underneath her Arizona home, the truth is waiting to break the surface. Do you think the tear in that glove is going to crack this case wide open? Or is whoever did this already gone? Tell us in the comments, share this so more people know Nancy Guthrie's name, and subscribe so you're here when the answer finally drops.